As socialists, we typically reject nationalism as, well, trash. It follows that we want some form of international social organization. As more libertarian-leaning socialists, we also want some form of participatory democracy. So, for our dreams to come true, a lot of people need to talk to each other. This is not only true when we've already won, but it is also true now. An international socialist movement is far stronger than an isolated movement that limits itself to national borders. So it follows that a lot of communication has to take place. Right now, this communication mostly happens in English, which is far from optimal, for a few reasons that we will look at now. I'll argue here that our movements need to encourage language learning, and at the end of the video I'll share some resources that I like if you want to get started. Why learn languages? First, how many people speak English? You might get surprised when I tell you that the number of English speakers in the world, native speakers and second language speakers combined, is only around 2 billion, according to the largest estimates. I've also read the number 1.5 billion. It is true that that is a lot of people, and it is also true that the number is increasing. But we need to keep in mind that very many of those people don't speak English fluently and will feel very uncomfortable speaking it. The situation is then that about a quarter of the world's population speaks any English whatsoever, but the number of people we can effectively communicate with is much smaller than that. How much? I don't know. I could probably find it out, but my teacher keeps noticing that I'm writing this script in class. We know that effective communication is extremely important for an international socialist movement, but in some places English knowledge is very scarce. This map shows the percentage of English speakers in different countries. This map shows how well people speak English in different countries. First, notice that countries with Germanic languages, the same language group as English, all speak English very well, and that virtually no countries that speak languages that are not in the Indo-European language family generally don't speak it more than at the medium level. Now, notice that in general, it is Europe that speaks English well. Very high level on this map, by the way, means B2, and a very low one means A2. B2 speakers speak the language fluently, but far from the level of a native speaker. Have you ever noticed that on the internet, it seems that all the news we're exposed to either happens in Europe or in North America, even though Europe and North America's population combined only accounts for 17% of the world's population? Language may explain some of this. In addition, news written in English are usually written with the perspective of some person from the so-called West. So not only will there be less information about places with major language barriers, but it will also be presented with a distorted perspective. So what does this lead to? It essentially leads to a skewed and divided discourse. We get an English-speaking world, a Spanish-speaking world, a Hindustani-speaking world, and etc. that in practice are in various degrees isolated from each other. That's not a very good starting point for an effective and genuine internationalism. Fuck, is my... yeah, okay, I think my light is... okay. Internationalism. I think that language could significantly decrease the Eurocentrism that many organizations in the so-called West suffer from. Now, even if that was not a problem, we would still need to know each other's languages. Then, it is nice that a large number of people know them, otherwise the few multilingual members in the organization aren't going to get responsibilities and powers they don't have to get. That's not very good for a direct democracy either. If our organizations take this seriously, We can and should develop a situation where our organization's members combined know a lot of languages and use this knowledge to establish deeper connections to comrades around the world. That, I think, might be step one into developing a genuine internationalist feeling in the world's revolutionary movement. What languages should we learn? Now, if I could, I would have learned every single language that exists in the entire world. Unfortunately, for obvious reasons, that's not going to work well, so we have to pick something. This part of the video is mainly just a few ideas that you might use as an inspiration. Don't take it as a "this is the languages we must learn period" thing, because that's not what I intend it to be. I think it's much better that people learn the languages that inspire them than, well, what some kid told them on YouTube. First, a list of the largest languages that exists is not a bad place to start. It can make a lot of sense to learn a language that's large in terms of total number of speakers, number of native speakers, or number of countries that speak the language. Then, Spanish, Hindi, Arabic, Mandarin, French, and more are all good choices. Another thing to think about is that there is a huge difference in how difficult it is to learn different languages. The American Foreign Institute is a nice resource to find out how difficult languages are if you are a native English speaker. It works fairly well for me too, since I speak another Germanic language natively. Eller hva, folkens? Now, combine that with inspiration and how much time you want to spend, and you can find out if you're gonna learn any of them, or something else. Also, just mentioning, it is actually very healthy to learn languages, according to a few studies. But that's just a place to look for inspiration if you want to learn a language. But don't know which one. If a language interests you, learn it. Just not Klingon, okay? I'm sorry, but that's in... Okay, fine. I'm not gonna destroy the fun, but organizing language learning. A revolutionary organization should, as soon as they have the resources to do so, start encouraging their members to learn languages. The first thing they should do is to map every language skill that's in the organization. Second, they should get an overview over what languages people wish to learn in the organization, and make sure both those who already know it and all those who wish to learn it are aware of each other. This way, they can motivate each other and coordinate their learning. The organization should also get a list of languages it would be nice to have in the organization and start encouraging the learning of it. And once you can, start translating pamphlets, etc. so that it can be used by other people. But how? I taught myself Spanish and Esperanto. I thus have some experience with language learning resources, and I feel like I should share the resources I've liked most. Duolingo. If the language you want to learn exists on Duolingo, I would suggest giving it a try. It is a good kickstart. It is quite fun and has a streak functionality and some social functionality that can be quite motivating. The downsides are that the instructions can be somewhat unclear, especially if you have no experience with foreign languages earlier. And so you'll have to look up grammar somewhere else if you want to understand it well. Also, the choice of words and sentences you learn on this app are quite interesting sometimes. The last thing I want to mention is that this app doesn't take you any longer than being able to start reading, listening, and speaking a tiny bit, so you'll have to get a new tool fairly quickly. Anke. You'll have to repeat words right. Anke is the best tool for that in my opinion. It employs spaced repetition in an extremely good way. If you haven't heard about spaced repetition, I have put a link in the description for you. And this time I actually know what to link before I write it in the script, so it will actually be there. It can be used for any language. You can make the flashcards yourself, or you can download shared decks. Memorize. Memorize is another spaced repetition app that you might want to look at if you think Anke's flashcard exclusive design is boring. It provides other ways of repeating the words too. I don't like it personally. Let's move on. Link Q or Link or whatever. This one is quite pricey at $10 a month, but it's too good to not be mentioned. It is an assisting reading tool. It is an assisted reading tool where you can read texts. Many of the texts have audio with them, so you can read and listen at the same time. What makes it special is that you can click on words where a translation is automatically provided, so you don't need to look up every fucking word you don't understand at Google Translate. These words become links or linkus, I don't know how to pronounce it, which are basically an overview of the words you don't understand. These can be exported to Anke and repeated there. It can also be repeated inside the app itself, but I don't think that functionality is very good, so export it. Download Anke, it's the most important one here, okay? The words you do understand are counted, so it's very motivating. You can see the number of words you understand. That's kind of cool. You can't do that with other stuff. It also has a streak function. The downsides are obviously the price tag and the fact that you can't use it for all languages. Learning with text. This tool is basically like Link, but it's a fucking hassle to use. But it's open source, free, and you can have more or less any language on it. I'll probably start using this now as I want to learn languages that aren't on Link. So that's that. In my experience, I find language learning to be the most effective when you focus on using the language, either by understanding some content, writing, translating, or speaking. I'll typically do most of the grammar studying when I can already have like a form of simple conversation, not immediately as they for some reason do in school. Now, I am by no means an expert, and it might not work for everyone. I don't even know what the scientific consensus is, if there is one. If you like this video, you should like the video, click subscribe, yeah, etc. Today I'm not gonna have a cringy and screen joking session. I'm just gonna end the video now, and then I'm gonna go maintain my Duolingo streak actually.